Hello and welcome to another episode of Touchdown Point. Today we're going to cover the initial call on the ground, and more specifically the initial call on the ground at City Airport, Manchester, Barton. Now Barton has a flight information service, call sign Barton Information. We're also going to cover some common mistakes that pilots make and some things that we shouldn't say. Now at some airfields, specifically Barton as well, there is no booking out system via the telephone. The booking out is done over the phone, so the first time the FISO knows what your intentions are is in the initial call on the ground. That's why we need to include some certain things, and you'll see an example of this very shortly. One mistake I sometimes hear is pilots calling up on the ground with just the station call sign on their call sign, and that's it. Unfortunately, the person on the other side of the radio, whether they're a flight information service officer, air traffic control officer, or an air ground communication service, don't know what that pilot wants, and what the pilot's actually waiting for is for the person on the other side of the radio to say, pass your message. We don't need to do that on the ground. All that does is create extra workload for the pilot and the person on the other side of the radio. We should actually request what we want on the initial call. So a good example would be Barton Information, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, request taxi to fuel. In the previous example, the pilot's waiting for the flight information service officer or the ATCO to say, pass your message. They'll then come back and say, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, request taxi to fuel. Now you can see how that can all be done in one transmission. So by requesting it on the first transmission, you can actually cut down on the amount of transmissions. Another common mistake is people calling up and just saying Barton Information, Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, request taxi. The person on the other side of the radio doesn't know what that aircraft wants to do. So they don't know if the aircraft's going to remain in the circuit, whether it's flying away to another airport, or whether it's just going for a local flight. So they don't know what information to pass it, so then the question comes back from the FISO saying, what's your POB, what's your destination, what's your type of flight? The pilot then has to reply, and then the airfield information is given. That's again increasing the amount of transmissions that are being given in a possibly busy environment. And thirdly, another common mistake is pilots not actually using the correct phraseology for the type of flight that they're doing. I do hear quite often people saying local circuits, or a local flight to Sleep, or a local flight to Blackpool. There are only three types of flight. One of those is circuits, which of course is remaining in the ATZ, practicing landings or maybe low approach and go arounds. That's circuit, so you're just flying around, constantly practicing landings. In that situation, you'll be given the pressure setting of the QFE. Another type of flight is a local flight. Now the definition of a local flight is taking off and landing at the same aerodrome without landing anywhere else. So technically you could take off from Barton, fly all the way to John O'Groats, all the way back again without landing, and that's a local flight. Lastly, on the radio we may call up and say a flight to Blackpool. That means we're landing away at Blackpool. We're physically going to land at the airport. So when someone says local circuits, you can see there, well, is it a local flight or is it circuits? If someone says a local flight to Blackpool, well, is it a local flight or are you landing at Blackpool? Are you just going to go and fly around Blackpool? So we want to call up for either circuits, a local flight, or a flight to and the destination, whether that's Blackpool, Sleip, Carnarvon, Liverpool. So coming up now is an example of an initial call on the ground I did on a recent flight, and it's for a local flight from Barton. On the screen you'll also see a script for an initial call on the ground, and we don't say the words in red, we just fill the blanks in, but we do say the words in black, so you can see there the request on the initial call and the reply you'll get back. We'll get back a runway, a circuit, and a pressure setting, also taxi instructions, and these all need to be read back, including the crossing of any runways. So if a FISO says to you, taxi holding point Bravo 3, cross runway 02, that must be read back. So coming up now is an example of the initial call on the ground. Enjoy.
Barton Information, Golf Charlie Golf Victor Tango, request taxi for a local flight to POB.
Charlie Golf Victor Tango, Barton Information, stand by. Golf Charlie Golf Victor Tango, roger, runway use, 08 left, circuit left hand, QNH 1032.
Runway 08 left, circuit left hand, QNH 1032, Golf Charlie Golf Victor Tango.
Golf Victor Tango, taxi to holding point Bravo 3, cross runway 02.
Taxi holding point Bravo 3, cross runway 02, Golf Victor Tango.
So So you can see there I followed the format that was shown on the screen at the beginning of the video. The FISO had all the information they needed. At first they told me to stand by, so of course they were busy with something else. It was a very busy day this, they were talking to other aircraft in the circuit, maybe taking a phone call from another air traffic service unit, or in the case here at Barton, they may have been talking to vehicles or personnel which are actually on a different frequency. They're on a UHF frequency rather than VHF. So of course as pilots we can't hear that, but it could be very busy in the background trying to organise a runway inspection, for example, or cross a vehicle from one side of the runway to the other. So I was told to stand by. When told to stand by, we don't say anything. We don't even say to them standing by. We just silent, wait, and they will call us back when they're ready. So we're taxiing out now, we're going to do our power checks and get to the holding point. A common mistake at this point is for pilots to report ready for departure when there's an aircraft final. That's fine at a full air traffic control unit because they can give you a conditional clearance, which will come along the lines of Golf Charlie Delta behind the landing Cessna 172, line up behind. And what they're instructing us to do there is once the Cessna has landed, which is final, taxi onto the runway and line up in the direction of departure. Unfortunately, Flight Information Service, for example Barton, they cannot do that anymore. They used to be able to, but they can't do it now. So all they will say to you in that situation is hold position. You have to acknowledge that, that's a rebat requirement, so you'd have to say hold position, Golf Charlie Delta. And there are 3 transmissions, again possibly in a busy environment, that didn't need to be done. So it's increasing your workload, it's increasing the FISO's workload as well. So best thing to do is wait until you can physically see there's a gap, you've checked the final approach, you may have checked the base leg as well. You see an aircraft that's on the base leg and you think, I'll get away ahead of that. So then you'd call ready for departure. If the runway isn't immediately available, so an aircraft might have landed on it and rolled out when you call ready for departure, there might be a vehicle crossing, there might be a helicopter about to cross, there might be personnel on the runway, the FISO is likely to say to you, report lined up runway 08 left, or report lined up runway 26 right, or whatever the runway is at the time. So they're asking you to report something in the future. So what we would do is taxi onto the runway, of course, we need to acknowledge that, but we taxi onto the runway, and only when we are lined up in the direction of departure would we report lined up. Again, if the runway is still occupied, we still can't go anywhere. And we still need to wait for that phrase from the Flight Information Service officer of take off at your discretion.
Golf Victor Tango, holding point Bravo 3, ready for departure.
Golf Victor Tango, report lined up, runway 08 left.
Wilco to Golf Victor Tango.
So you can see here I reported ready for departure. Oliver, the Flight Information Service officer, asked me to report lined up runway 08 left. He's asked me to report something in the future, so my reply was Wilco, Golf Victor Tango. As I taxi onto the runway, I don't even get a chance to report lined up, and Oliver says to me, take off at your discretion. The reason behind this is whatever was blocking the runway, and in this example it was a PA-28 which just landed before me, has now vacated the runway, so there's no point in holding me any longer or waiting for me to report lined up. The obstruction has gone, the runway is available, and Oliver said to me, take off at your discretion. Now what the Flight Information Service officer is actually saying in plain English when they say that is, take off if you want to. So what we should reply is, taking off, Golf Victor Tango. We hear people saying, take off at my discretion, Golf Victor Tango, for example. What the pilot's actually replying there in plain English is, take off if I want to. But the Flight Information Service officer and everybody else on the frequency and in the circuit needs to know what you're going to do. So a good example I like to use to people when I'm teaching people the RT is, if you were to come over to my house, for example, and I say to you, take a biscuit if you want one, and you look at me and say, take a biscuit if I want one. In that situation, I'm just sat there thinking, well, are you going to take one or not? And that's what happens when people reply, take off at my discretion to a Flight Information Service officer. The Flight Information Service officer sat in the tower, and the person that's laid downwind and the person that's on the base leg is thinking, is this person going or not? So what we should reply is our intention. Going back to that biscuit scenario, I know it's a bit of a strange one, but if I said to you, take a biscuit if you like one, you'd say, oh yes please, or no thanks. You're letting me know what you're doing, and by saying taking off or holding, if you spotted traffic that's left base and you think I'm not going to get away before that, you're letting everybody know what you're doing, so people aren't second guessing and thinking, well, do I take the biscuit barrel away or not?
Golf Victor Tango, runway 08 left, take off at your discretion, service wind calm.
Taking off runway 08 left, Golf Victor Tango.
So there we have it, the initial call on the ground at a flight information service. Thanks to City Airport for letting us record. Thank you for Mainair for letting us use the aircraft. And a special thanks to Oliver Doyle, who was the FISO at the time, and Graham and Gareth, who are also in the tower. In the meantime, if you have any questions that you may want answering, drop us a message. Our contact details are in the description below. You can also visit touchdownpoint.co.uk. In aviation, there's always something new to learn, and we're looking forward to learning with you. Until next time, stay safe and happy flying.